In the midst of the chaos and uncertainty that life often presents, there are moments when everything seems to fall into place effortlessly. It could be a sudden feeling of clarity about a decision you've been struggling with for weeks, or an unexpected opportunity that appears at just the right time. These moments often leave us wondering, was this coincidence, or is there something greater at play? In today's fast-paced world, it's easy to overlook the subtle signs that guide us toward our true path. The noise of daily life, our work, relationships, responsibilities, often drowns out the quiet whispers of something more profound. Something that calls us to step in a direction we might not yet fully understand. But what if those whispers are more than just random thoughts? What if they are divine messages, guiding us toward our higher purpose, helping us navigate life's challenges with grace and wisdom? This story is not just about the mystical or the supernatural. It's about the very real ways in which divine guidance manifests in our lives. It's about understanding the power of intuition, recognizing the subtle cues that point us toward our destined path, and learning how to trust that inner compass even when it doesn't seem to make sense. Imagine a time when you were facing a difficult decision, perhaps in your career, in a personal relationship, or in a choice that could change the course of your life. You may have felt conflicted, torn between different options, uncertain about which direction to take. Then, out of nowhere, a moment of clarity struck you. Perhaps it was a conversation with a stranger, a book that fell into your hands, or simply a sudden feeling that this was the right choice. You may not have been able to explain why, but deep down, you knew it was the right path to follow. That, my friend, might have been divine guidance at work. The ability to recognize divine guidance requires a certain level of awareness and openness. We must be willing to listen, really listen, to the subtle nudges that we often dismiss as coincidence or imagination. But once we open ourselves to the possibility that there is something greater guiding us, life begins to unfold in ways we never imagined. As we embark on this journey of discovery, it's important to remember that divine guidance is not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes, it appears in the quiet moments, the seemingly insignificant experiences that, upon reflection, reveal themselves as pivotal turning points. Our challenge is not to force our will upon life, but to align ourselves with the flow of something greater than ourselves. Something that knows us better than we know ourselves. This story will explore how to recognize these subtle signs and how to cultivate a deeper connection with the divine guidance that is always available to us. Whether you believe in a higher power, the universe, or simply the power of your own intuition, there is a force at work in your life, one that can help you make decisions, find peace in difficult times, and lead you to the fulfillment of your true purpose. In the journey of life, there are certain moments that stand out more than others, moments where everything seems to align perfectly, where the answers to our deepest questions appear out of nowhere, and where the decisions we make feel as if they were made for us. These moments often carry with them a sense of awe, a quiet knowing that something greater than ourselves is at work. It was during one of those quiet moments that Mia first experienced what she would later come to recognize as divine guidance. At the time, Mia had no idea what was happening, and like many people, she was dismissive of the subtle nudges she was receiving. She was too caught up in the noise of her life, the pressures of her career, the demands of her relationships, and the constant pull of societal expectations. But the signs were there, patiently waiting for her to notice. Mia had been working in the corporate world for over a decade. She had built a successful career, climbing the ranks and earning accolades for her hard work and dedication. Yet, despite the outward success, there was a deep sense of dissatisfaction that had begun to grow within her. She felt as though something was missing, but she couldn't put her finger on it. She had achieved everything she thought she wanted: financial stability, a nice home, and a comfortable life, but something inside her whispered that there was more to life than this. She began to question whether this was truly the path she was meant to follow. or whether she had simply been following a script that had been written for her by society. It was during a weekend retreat in the mountains that Mia's first experience with divine guidance occurred. The retreat was meant to be a time for relaxation and reflection. A chance for her to step away from the hustle and bustle of her daily life and reconnect with herself. She had no specific intentions or expectations going into the retreat, but as she settled into the peaceful surroundings, something began to stir within her. It was as though the noise of the world had suddenly quieted, and she could hear her own thoughts more clearly. During a meditation session, Mia experienced something she had never felt before, a sense of deep peace and clarity. It was as though she was no longer weighed down by the constant mental chatter that usually occupied her mind. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt free. She had no thoughts about her job, her responsibilities, or her future. Instead, she simply existed in the present moment, allowing herself to be fully present with her surroundings. As the session came to a close, Mia opened her eyes and looked around the room. It was as if the retreat space had transformed into something more than just a physical location. The air felt lighter, the colors of the landscape more vibrant, and the world seemed to be pulsating with energy. She didn't understand it at the time, but in that moment, Mia felt as though she was connected to something greater than herself. In the days that followed, Mia's experience deepened. She began to notice small synchronicities in her life. People showing up at just the right time, opportunities appearing out of nowhere, and a sense of guidance that seemed to lead her toward choices she had never considered before. At first, Mia attributed these events to coincidence or luck. After all, she was a practical, logical person who didn't believe in things like divine intervention or fate. But the more she experienced these synchronicities, the more she began to question her assumptions. One evening, Mia found herself in a conversation with an old friend, Sarah, who had always been a spiritual person. Sarah had always talked about trusting the universe, listening to one's intuition, and following the signs that were presented along the way. Mia had always dismissed these ideas as naive or impractical, but something about Sarah's words resonated with her now. She realized that the synchronicities she had been experiencing were more than just random occurrences, they were signs, guiding her toward a new path. That night, Mia went to bed feeling conflicted. She was torn between the life she had built and the possibility of something greater. The next morning, she woke up early to go for a walk in the woods surrounding the retreat center. As she walked, she noticed a small stone in her path. It was an ordinary stone, but for some reason, it caught her attention. She stopped and picked it up, turning it over in her hand. As she did, a thought flashed through her mind. This stone is a symbol of stability and grounding. It's reminding me to stay grounded while I explore new possibilities. It was a strange thought, one that didn't feel like it came from her own mind. For a moment, Mia was taken aback. She realized that, somehow, the stone had a message for her, a message she couldn't fully explain, but one that felt deeply meaningful. Later that day, Mia sat down to journal her thoughts. As she wrote, she reflected on her life and the choices she had made. She realized that for years, she had been living according to other people's expectations, her parents' expectations, her friends' expectations, and the expectations of society. She had been chasing success and security, but in doing so, she had neglected her own desires and passions. It was as though she had been living in a fog, moving through life on autopilot without ever questioning whether she was truly happy. It was in this moment of introspection that Mia understood. She wasn't unhappy because of her job or her lifestyle. She was unhappy because she had been living out of alignment with her true self. She had ignored the small whispers of guidance that had been trying to steer her toward a more fulfilling life. And now, those whispers were becoming louder and clearer. Mia realized that divine guidance wasn't about waiting for a grand revelation or a dramatic event. It was about being open to the subtle signs that were always present, signs that could guide her toward the life she was meant to live. She didn't have to have all the answers right away, but she knew that if she followed the signs, the path would become clear in time. As Mia left the retreat center, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer focused on finding the perfect path or the right decision. Instead, she was committed to being present, listening to the guidance that came her way, and trusting that everything would unfold as it was meant to. After leaving the retreat center, Mia found herself in a period of transition, one that was both exciting and unsettling. The clarity she had gained from her time in the mountains was still fresh in her mind. But she also felt the weight of uncertainty bearing down on her. She had made the decision to explore a new path, but the road ahead was far from clear. The pressure to return to her familiar life in the corporate world, to pick up where she had left off, was strong. Yet, deep down, she knew she couldn't go back to the life she had once known. The whispers of divine guidance had opened her eyes to something much larger than herself. Something that called her to take a leap of faith and follow her heart. Mia began to question everything she had once thought to be true. She had always believed that success was defined by outward accomplishments, career achievements, financial stability, and the approval of others. But now, she saw success in a different light. It wasn't about checking off boxes on a list or meeting society's expectations. It was about living in alignment with her true self, following the guidance that came from within, and trusting that the universe would provide everything she needed. As she returned to her city life, Mia began to notice more and more signs, small moments that seemed too coincidental to be mere accidents. One morning, while walking to her office, she passed by a street musician who was playing a beautiful piece on his violin. The music seemed to speak directly to her soul, filling her with a sense of peace and serenity. As she stopped to listen, the musician smiled and nodded at her, as if acknowledging something unspoken between them. In that moment, Mia felt a profound connection to something beyond the ordinary, as though the universe was trying to tell her that she was on the right path. Later that week, Mia received an unexpected phone call. It was from an old friend, Rachel, who had always been a free spirit, someone who had chosen a different path than the traditional one. Rachel had left her corporate job years ago to pursue a career as a writer, traveling the world and living life on her own terms. Mia had always admired Rachel's courage, but she had never considered taking a similar leap herself. As they chatted, Rachel shared stories of her travels, her writing projects, and her newfound sense of freedom. Mia listened intently, feeling a deep sense of yearning within herself. It was as though Rachel's words were exactly what Mia needed to hear at that moment, reaffirming the idea that there was more to life than what she had been doing. That night, Mia couldn't sleep. She lay awake, her mind racing with thoughts and possibilities. She realized that she had been holding herself back for years, afraid to take risks and pursue her dreams. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized that fear had been the only thing standing in her way. She had spent so much time seeking approval from others, trying to fit into a mold that wasn't meant for her, that she had forgotten what it felt like to truly live for herself. She wondered if this was what divine guidance was trying to show her, an invitation to break free from the constraints of her past and embrace the unknown. The following day, Mia made the decision to take a sabbatical from her corporate job. She didn't know what she would do next, but she knew she needed space to figure it out. She spent the next few months traveling to places she had always wanted to visit, immersing herself in different cultures and experiences. During her travels, she continued to encounter signs, small, seemingly insignificant moments that, in retrospect, would prove to be pivotal in her journey of self-discovery. In Bali, Mia found herself in a small temple, sitting alone in quiet contemplation. The serene environment allowed her mind to quiet, and she felt a deep sense of connection to the earth beneath her and the sky above her. As she sat there, she closed her eyes and simply breathed, allowing the stillness to envelop her. A voice, soft yet powerful, seemed to echo in her mind. "Trust yourself, Mia. Trust the path that is unfolding before you. She opened her eyes, looking around the temple, and saw a butterfly flutter past her. It was as if the butterfly, a symbol of transformation, was carrying the message that Mia needed to hear. She smiled, feeling a deep sense of reassurance wash over her. In the months that followed, Mia continued to follow her intuition, allowing it to guide her in ways that felt unfamiliar but deeply authentic. She began to explore creative outlets she had long neglected: writing, painting, and even yoga. Each new endeavor felt like a step toward rediscovering who she truly was beneath the layers of expectation and obligation that had once defined her. She felt as though she was peeling away the walls she had built around herself, revealing a more authentic version of her soul. As Mia embraced the signs and synchronicities that continued to appear in her life, she began to understand that divine guidance wasn't always loud or dramatic. It wasn't about waiting for a divine lightning bolt to strike or for everything to fall into place in an instant. Instead, it was about the small, quiet nudges that guided her toward her higher purpose. It was about listening to her heart, trusting her intuition, and recognizing that the universe was always working in her favor, even when it didn't seem obvious. One evening, while sitting in a cafe, Mia met a woman who would change the course of her life. The woman, named Sophia, was a successful entrepreneur who had built a thriving business from the ground up. She had a calm, grounded presence that immediately put Mia at ease. They struck up a conversation, and Mia shared her story, her doubts, her fears, and her desire to create something meaningful with her life. Sophia listened attentively, offering words of encouragement and wisdom. She told Mia that the key to success wasn't about having everything figured out from the start, but about taking small, intentional steps toward the things that truly mattered. Sophia's words resonated deeply with Mia. For the first time in a long time, Mia felt a sense of clarity about what she wanted to do next. She realized that her journey wasn't just about finding a new career or making a big change. It was about discovering her true self and living in alignment with her values. Divine guidance had led her to this point, and it was now time for her to trust herself fully and step into her power. The weeks following Mia's meeting with Sophia marked the beginning of a significant transformation in her life. With each passing day, the weight of uncertainty seemed to lift, and she found herself more and more aligned with the intuitive guidance that had been gently urging her toward a new path. She realized that divine guidance wasn't something external, something that was to be sought from outside forces. Rather, it was a quiet, internal knowing that had always been present within her. The challenge, she discovered, wasn't about receiving the guidance, it was about trusting it and acting upon it. Even when the path ahead seemed unclear, in the months that followed, Mia continued to embrace her journey of self-discovery. Surrendering more fully to the unfolding of her life, she began to create her own path, one that was no longer defined by societal expectations or the pressure to achieve outward success. Instead, Mia focused on what felt true to her heart and soul. She explored new passions, took risks, and trusted that the universe would provide her with the opportunities she needed to fulfill her purpose. Mia's journey took her to various places, both physically and spiritually. She traveled to countries that had always fascinated her, immersing herself in new cultures and experiences. In Italy, she found herself spending hours in art galleries, captivated by the beauty and creativity that surrounded her. In India, she practiced meditation and yoga, deepening her spiritual connection and learning to quiet her mind. Each place she visited seemed to offer her a new piece of the puzzle, a new insight that brought her closer to the truth of who she was. But it wasn't just through travel that Mia found herself changing. Back home, in the quiet of her own apartment, Mia continued to reflect on her life and the choices she had made. She began to write more frequently, journaling her thoughts and feelings in a way she had never done before. Through her writing, Mia discovered a deep sense of clarity. The words flowed from her effortlessly, as if they were being guided by something greater than herself. It was as if every word she wrote was another step closer to her true purpose. One day, while reviewing a journal entry she had written weeks before, Mia came across a passage that stood out to her. It was a simple phrase, but it resonated deeply. The path is not always clear, but the signs are always there. As she read those words, she realized that this had been the essence of her journey all along. The signs of divine guidance had always been there, whispering to her, gently nudging her forward, but it was only by trusting herself that she had been able to recognize them. Mia's understanding of divine guidance deepened as she began to see how the signs were often connected to her own inner wisdom. She no longer felt the need to search for answers outside of herself. Instead, she turned inward, trusting her intuition to lead the way. She recognized that her intuition was not separate from the divine guidance she had been seeking. It was, in fact, the very channel through which that guidance flowed. As her connection to her inner wisdom deepened, Mia also began to see how the universe conspired to support her. Opportunities started to appear in ways that seemed too perfect to be mere coincidence. One afternoon, while walking through a park, she met a woman named Grace, who was working on a community project focused on sustainable living. Grace shared her vision for creating a more environmentally conscious world and invited Mia to join the project. Mia felt an immediate sense of resonance with Grace's mission, and without hesitation, she agreed to become involved. The project became a turning point for Mia. Through her work with Grace and the team, Mia discovered a passion for sustainability and environmental advocacy. She realized that this was a calling she had never fully explored before, but one that felt deeply aligned with her values and purpose. Divine guidance had led her to this opportunity, and she had trusted herself enough to say yes. In doing so, she opened herself to a new chapter in her life, one that was more meaningful and fulfilling than she could have ever imagined. As Mia continued her work with the community project, she felt a deep sense of gratitude for the signs that had guided her along the way. She saw how everything in her life had been leading her to this moment, to this work that was aligned with her true self. She had once believed that her career in the corporate world was the ultimate goal, but now she saw that it was merely a stepping stone towards something much greater. Through her work in sustainability, Mia was able to combine her skills, her passions, and her purpose in a way that felt deeply authentic. Mia's journey of trusting divine guidance didn't stop with the community project. Over time, she began to explore new ways to share her message with others. She started writing articles and giving talks on the importance of following one's intuition and trusting the signs of the universe. She spoke openly about her own journey and how the subtle nudges of divine guidance had led her to a life that was more fulfilling and aligned with her true purpose. In one of her talks, Mia shared the story of how she had come to recognize divine guidance in her life. She spoke of the retreat in the mountains, the synchronicities that had occurred, and the quiet voice that had urged her to trust herself. She explained how the signs had not always been loud or dramatic, but had been present in the small moments, like the butterfly in Bali, the street musician in the city, and the journal entry that had helped her see the truth. Mia emphasized that divine guidance was not a mystical or elusive concept. It was something that was available to everyone, if only they were willing to listen and trust. As Mia spoke, she noticed the impact her words were having on the audience. People came up to her afterward, sharing their own stories of divine guidance and how they, too, had learned to trust the subtle signs that were guiding them. Mia felt a deep sense of fulfillment as she realized that her journey was not just about her own growth. It was also about helping others recognize the signs in their own lives and empowering them to follow their intuition. The more Mia embraced her journey of divine guidance, the more she realized that it was a never-ending process. Each new step she took revealed new layers of understanding and insight. Divine guidance was not a destination to reach but a path to walk, a path that required patience, trust, and a willingness to follow the signs, no matter how small they seemed. One evening, as Mia sat in her favorite cafe, Sipping tea and reflecting on her journey, she felt a deep sense of peace. She knew that her life was no longer defined by the expectations of others or by the pursuit of external success. It was defined by her connection to herself and to the divine guidance that had always been present. Waiting for her to listen, she had learned that the path ahead would never be completely clear. But as long as she trusted the signs, she would always be led to where she was meant to be. Mia smiled softly to herself, knowing that her journey was far from over. It was a journey of continuous discovery, a journey that would lead her to places she could never have imagined. But one thing was certain: she would walk it with trust, with faith, and with the knowledge that the signs were always there, guiding her every step of the way. As Mia sat by the window of her small apartment, looking out at the city that once felt overwhelming but now felt strangely peaceful, she couldn't help but reflect on the incredible journey she had been on. It had been a long road, one full of doubt, confusion, and moments of profound clarity. But it had also been a road of transformation, of shedding old layers and discovering new depths within herself. A road where she learned to trust the whispers of her heart and the signs of the universe, guiding her toward a life that felt truer, more authentic, and more aligned with her soul's purpose. Mia had come a long way from the woman who had walked into that retreat center in the mountains. Unsure of herself and her path, the Mia who had once defined success by external achievements, by career titles, by paychecks, by the approval of others, was no more. In her place was a woman who had learned to define success by the peace in her heart, by the sense of fulfillment that came from living in alignment with her deepest values. She had learned that divine guidance wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic revelations. It wasn't about waiting for some cosmic sign to tell her what to do next. It was about learning to listen deeply to the still, small voice within her that knew exactly what she needed. The journey had taught her that the universe was always speaking to her, even in the quietest of moments. The street musician's song, the butterfly that fluttered past her in Bali, the journal entry that seemed to hold the key to her soul's deepest desires, these were not coincidences. These were the signs, the gentle nudges, that had been with her all along. Mia had learned to trust them, to recognize them for what they were, divine guidance, showing her the way. As Mia continued to build her life around this newfound understanding, she felt a deep sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the signs, for the moments of clarity, and for the opportunities that had come her way. She had been given the chance to step off the well-worn path that society had laid out for her, to explore a new life that felt more authentic and meaningful. And with each new step, she felt more connected to herself, more at peace with the decisions she was making. Her work with the community project on sustainability had become a major part of her life, and it had brought her immense joy and fulfillment. But it wasn't just about the work itself, it was about the way it aligned with her values, the way it allowed her to contribute to something greater than herself. Mia had found her purpose, not in a grand vision or an external goal, but in the simple act of living in alignment with what truly mattered to her. She had also found a deep connection with the people around her, the friendships she had formed along the way, particularly with Grace, the woman who had introduced her to the sustainability project, had been some of the most meaningful relationships she had ever experienced. They had shared their dreams, their challenges, and their hopes for the future. Together, they were building something important, something that felt like a true reflection of their values. And as Mia looked at her life now, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Mia's journey had not been easy. There had been times when doubt crept in, when the path ahead seemed unclear, when the fear of failure threatened to pull her back into her old ways. But each time that happened, she remembered the signs, the quiet voice within, and the deep knowing that she was being guided towards something greater. She had learned that divine guidance wasn't always about certainty or immediate results. It was about trust, the trust that the universe was always working on her behalf, even when things didn't make sense at the time. And so, she kept moving forward, step by step, trusting that each new experience was bringing her closer to her true self. One evening, as Mia sat with a group of friends at a small cafe, talking and laughing over cups of tea, she realized how much she had changed. Her friends, many of whom had known her before her journey of self-discovery, were amazed by the transformation they saw in her. They remarked on how much more grounded she seemed, how much more at peace with herself. And Mia could see it too. She felt more present, more in tune with her heart, more aware of the divine guidance that had been leading her every step of the way. As the evening drew to a close and Mia walked home through the quiet streets, she felt a deep sense of contentment wash over her. She had come to understand that life wasn't about reaching some final destination. It wasn't about achieving external success or meeting the expectations of others. It was about the journey itself, the journey of self-discovery, of listening to the signs, of trusting the process, and of living in alignment with the deepest truths of who she was. In that moment, Mia made a silent promise to herself. She promised to continue following the signs, to continue listening to the whispers of her heart, and to trust that divine guidance would always be there, leading her toward the life she was meant to live. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew that as long as she stayed true to herself, the path would unfold as it was meant to. And so, Mia's journey continued, one step at a time, one sign at a time, with trust, with faith, and with the unwavering belief that she was exactly where she needed to be.